Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Austin Herb Society and our membership meeting for November 2nd. I'm Karen Kalergis, the president of the Austin Herb Society, and we are about all things herbal, being able to use herbs in your landscaping, in your cooking, medicinally, and in your arts and crafts. And today's speaker is going to talk to us about using them in a culinary way. So introduce her. I'm going to turn it over to our Vice President of Programs, Aline Guillot. Take it away, Aline.
Good morning, everyone. We are thrilled to have with us one of our favorite members, Autumn Schulze, who is one of the past presidents of the Herb Society, as well as a biomedical scientist, an herbalist, and a holistic health mentor. Autumn is the CEO also of Autumn's Harvest, her own limited corporation here. She is going to demonstrate for us today her special, or some of her special, culinary techniques. As you see, the title is Herbal Twists on Culinary Creations. And she's also going to discuss that they're not only taste tempting, but therapeutically supportive. So we can enjoy them in many different aspects, healthy and tasty. So Autumn, we welcome you and we're ready for you to begin your presentation. Here's Autumn somewhere.
Hi, everybody. I am so delighted that you are here with us today, and I'm just going to share my screen to get started to be able to talk about some of these yummy recipes. Now, feel free to put questions in the chat if you do have any along the way, and we'll be able to address those. If I see them in the middle, I may be able to address them, or we will address them at the end as well. Let me start my timer so I don't go too far over. I can be verbose at times. So, welcome everybody. I have a picture on the left of me in my herbal apothecary. That's where I am right now, coming live to you from Lake Travis outside of Austin, Texas. And here are some of the recipes that we are going to be reviewing today. I'm so excited. Hopefully you leave hungry. And here's a list of some of the recipes that we are going to talk about today. There's a couple of ones that I slipped in, but this is mainly what we'll be focusing on. So really delighted. And I'm sure some of them you've made before in a certain way, and some may be new to you as well. So let's just dive on in because there's a lot of great content. So starting out with poached pears with basil syrup. So when we talk about something kind of sweet, something that you can use from the garden, being able to just utilize the harvest, this was something that really came to me, especially right now as we start in the Northern Hemisphere, especially in Austin, slightly heading towards the colder season, us being able to harvest our basil and being able to do something with it. So this is actually going to be great to, you can serve 4 people, but you could definitely double or even half the recipe as well. So it has sugar, water, basil leaves, lemon juice, and pears. So basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be making a lovely basil syrup then to be able to utilize with poached pears. And we have a couple other another syrup that we'll talk about later today, which is a cough syrup recipe as well. So first, you're going to put the sugar, the water, the basil, and the lemon juice into a shallow, wide pan. And now whenever we cook and use herbs, it is good to use stainless steel or even use glass, because copper can actually change the different properties of the herbs themselves. So just kind of a little something to keep in mind. And okay, just going to minimize here. Okay, and then you can peel the pears while you are bringing that to a light simmer and be able to cut them however you want to be able to present them, such as in the way in the picture on the right. So you cover with paper lid, you can kind of cover it and you can cover with the lid of the pan, cook gently for 20 to 30 minutes. So what you're doing is you're really infusing the water with the basil itself. You're kind of doing a gentle, light infusion, almost a decoction with the basil to really open up those plant cell walls and be able to pull all those medicinal and yummy constituents out to be able to enjoy. So once you've arranged your pears, then you can taste the syrup, see if you want to simmer it just a little bit longer, and then be able to take it off. Now, be careful not to cook it too long, because then you'll actually start to caramelize it. So then recover the syrup, pour it onto the pears, and then it can actually keep as a compote for several weeks in the fridge. So just like with a syrup, any kind of syrup, you want to kind of watch it, keep an eye on it. If there's not preservatives in it, it will last a few weeks to a couple of months within the refrigerator, as long as there's limited to no contamination within there. And then once you've actually treated those poached pears, they'll also last for several weeks within the fridge as well. So that was just a really simple way to be able to use basil. I know it is definitely the time of year for us to be able to utilize basil from the garden, and basil can also help support our immune system as well. We'll talk about holy basil in a little while. So just kind of taking a step back and cooking with tea. I have a lovely book that I'm going to share with you at the end of the presentation that is all about culinary tea and using different teas and a lot of different recipes. But I wanted to give you a couple of ideas. So you could definitely use tea with cookies. And when I say tea, it's really the dried herb in this instance. It can be fresh herb that you make tea with. But when you're doing cookies, you would actually use the dry herb and you would turn it into a herbal powder, which I have my grinder here to show you a little demonstration of making herbal powder if we have time at the end. And you can then put this powder directly into your cookies, just like you would with kind of cinnamon powder. And it can be very yummy. I love putting lavender powder in sugar cookies. It just really brings it up a notch. And it's also relaxing. Lavender is a nervine, right? And so butter, you can definitely make butter. So you would do unsalted butter at room temperature, get it really soft and pliable, and mix it together with the tea leaves. So whole or ground, and these are going to be dried again. And so then that way it's going to be able to take on the flavor. You can mix it into a log and kind of cut small pieces to be able to cook with, and it can be very good on baked breads and biscuits. You know, if you could imagine maybe like a chai butter that you would make to be able to put on biscuits. Chai is one of my favorite teas. And then even something as simple as doing a stock, right? So you can infuse a stock so that you can cook grains, rice, barley, even make some stew bases or soup bases, and be able to use tea in addition to, or sometimes even replacing, a larger part of the stock, so that you also get those therapeutic benefits from the herbs as well. So just a couple of ideas. And don't feel like you have to write all of this down really quickly. I'm going to tell you where you can get the slides at the end of the presentation as well. So next, I want to transfer into Oximills, and Oximills may be something familiar to you. It may be something completely new. So it translates from the Greek word oxymili, which is acid and honey, which is a beautiful definition because this really is a vinegar and raw honey. I like to use apple cider vinegar, the Bragg's, that still has the mother in there. And of course, you're going to be getting all the benefits of the vinegar. If you use raw local honey, you're also going to be getting some allergy fighting benefits and different enzymes as well. And then, of course, the benefits of whatever herbs you're going to be using. And this is something that has been used for thousands of years. They found different honeys and oxymills and tombs. And it's wonderful to be able to boost the immune system, support digestion, and even soothe a sore throat, depending on what you're putting in there. So organic apple cider vinegar, it's high in acetic acid. And when you use it raw and unfiltered, like I said, you're going to be getting that mother with proteins and enzymes and wonderful, helpful gut bacteria, because we want to have a good diversification of the bacteria in our GI microbiome, because 90% of our immune system comes from the diversity and the health of our gut microbiome. Kind of cool stuff. So it's very similar to the fermented kombucha tea that you may have seen and tried. We have a lot of great kombucha companies here in Austin. So basic fire cider ingredients. So I'm sure many of you have heard of or made fire cider before. We're going to do a couple of different twists and talk about a couple of different twists to be able to utilize fire cider today. And I have a wonderful book about a lot of different fire cider recipes that you can utilize as well that I'll share with you later. So the basics of fire cider is going to be garlic, onions, ginger root, and horseradish. That's kind of the minimum four that you want to be able to utilize. A lot of different medicinal benefits there, right? So all four of these are great for the immune system and boosting our immune system. And some are even anti-carcinogenic as well, being cancer supportive and fighting. Ginger is really great for nausea. It's great to be able to soothe if you have cold or flu. It helps with the lungs. It can help move and expectorate things out of the lungs. And of course, if you've ever had horseradish, I'm sure that you've had some sinus movement after that as well. So it can be very clearing for the body as well. And then cayenne. Cayenne is so you can use as much or as little pepper or different peppers as you want to. I just made one with some jalapenos and Thai chilies from the garden for one of my friends who loves it really, really spicy. We'll do spicy for me, but you can definitely play it as spicy or as not spicy as you want to. However, cayenne is really great to add even in a small amount because it is anti-inflammatory. It can also be utilized. It has a little bit of an anodyne property, which is a little bit of pain relieving. And it also helps as an anti-inflammatory for different joint issues that one may be having. So what you would do is you would cut up all of these, and this is usually for about a 32-ounce jar. You could definitely make it in a larger batch if you wanted to, or even a smaller batch. So I usually just cut everything up and fill the jar about halfway to 3/4, and then cover it with apple cider vinegar. So really what you're doing in this instance is you are making first a tincture. And you can add the honey at this time when you're infusing, or you can add the honey later. I usually like to add the honey later because then I can add an infused honey, such as the ginger honey that I'm going to talk to y'all about in a little while. One of my favorite recipes. However, during this 6 weeks, a lot of these constituents, anything that is soluble within the ACV is going to be pulled out. So a lot of these medicinal benefits and flavor, of course, are going to be pulled out into the fire cider. And there's so many different ways that you can use it. Like I say, I'm going to share a recipe book for dozens of ways. You can even use it as a brine. You can take it straight. You can use it with olive oil to make a lovely salad dressing as well. So this is really intended to be taken by the spoonful, in addition to like an elderberry syrup or an echinacea tincture or tea, to be able to help stave off illness, to shorten illness if somebody is having it. And it almost like burns out the illness out of the body. It really definitely makes the face pucker, you know, whenever you are utilizing it, but it's just a lovely, lovely flavor overall and can be done in so many different ways. And you can refrigerate it after straining. You don't have to, but you can in order to prolong the shelf life itself. So I have here, if you want the link to the slides, this top blue line is a link. I have a free 20-minute video for you that I've done in making end-to-end fire cider. And it's a fire cider that has a lot of different herbs in it. It has some burdock root in there. It has some different herbal powders. And it's my absolute favorite intense fire cider recipe. So if you click on that, if you enter your name and email, then that will just automatically be sent to you. And you can see that 20-minute video. You also get a beautiful 2-page PDF of making the fire cider as well. So I just wanted to offer that to you today. So Next, we're going to talk about really, I get a lot of questions as to how can I use tincture leftovers? You know, a lot of people feel guilty once they've strained out the tincture after 6 weeks and just throwing that away. You can, of course, compost it. However, there's other ways that you could use, especially fire cider leftovers, because they taste so freaking good. So you would then, it's called kind of reusing your mark. So the liquid, whenever you're making a tincture, is called the mark. So in this case, the mark is going to be the apple, the mark is the herb. Sorry, the menstruum is the, early in the morning. The mark is the herb and the menstruum is the liquid. So we're going to reuse our mark. So if you have a dehydrator, this is a beautiful way to be able to use it because you can make bouillon and you can be able to use it year round. So after you strain the fire cider, and again, squeezing as much of that beautiful liquid out of there as you can then place it in your dehydrator. Now you want to make sure it's kind of in as small chunks as possible, just because once it's dehydrated, it's going to be harder to powder, right? So it's definitely chunky and juicy, and it may make the house smell a little bit. So you could take your dehydrator on the porch and be able to do it out there as well. So around 135 degrees and leave it running overnight. So this, you can really rely on either your food processor at the end to help you chop it, or I have dedicated coffee grinders that I've just got off of coffee bean grinders off of Amazon that you can be able to utilize, and especially with the smaller chunks, and be able to make the herbal powder. So if the mark or the herb is in pieces of 1/2 inch or larger, especially with the horseradish root, you may want to chop it into smaller pieces like I mentioned before dehydrating. This definitely makes it easier. So dehydrating fire cider, like I say, is very pungent. So decide how you want to do it. You could also be able to powder it in a Vitamix blender as well if you have one of those powerful blenders. So after powdering it, you can use a very fine kind of like one of those mesh noodle strainers. I know I have a lot of those strainers that help me even align the strainer with cheesecloth in order to actually strain the tincture itself. And then so that way you can get out the bigger chunks and then kind of grind them down again and see how small you can get it. And a few of those chunks aren't going to grind fully down. So you can just take those and put them into a small jar to just slap in some soup or something like that, and it'll soften up. But once you have kind of your powder, then you can add it to veggie or bone broths. You can add it to stock. You can even add it to warm water and just be able to sip it as well to be able to help boost the immune system. And it's very yummy in and of itself as well. And let's see, I don't think I have the bouillon recipe in the next slide. I think this was from a different presentation, but you can definitely be able to salt it if you want to, and be able to utilize it in so many different ways, so that way you're utilizing the fire cider, the immune boosting properties, all the way throughout the cold and flu season as we're heading indoors. Oh, no, I do have the recipe. Okay. So here is where you would make your own bouillon. So you would use a cup of nutritional yeast, a tablespoon of fine sea salt. And I really like the Himalayan sea salt because it has a lot of vitamins and minerals just in and of itself. It's optional to use some mushroom powder as well. So whichever edible mushrooms that you like. Seaweed flakes for iodine and being able to also help support the immune system and the bones. And then you would use the mark powder that we just made. So you just really whisk it all together and be able to put it into a clean glass jar. Again, you can mix it with some hot water, let it sit for a few minutes as a nutritive broth just to drink, add to soups, stews, rice, or even other dishes, or even sprinkle it on popcorn if you are daring. So another Oxymill that I have just learned to absolutely love over the last couple of months is this one here. I made it with one of my course groups in a demonstration day, and I have just absolutely fallen in love with it. So it has ashwagandha, rose, tulsi, and hibiscus. So ashwagandha and Tulsi are both adaptogens. So they are going to help you adapt to stress, changes in your life. Ashwagandha is beautiful over time to help with sleep and regulating sleep. It's also great for women who are transitioning through menopause to kind of help get them in the mood. And ashwagandha has a beautiful affinity for the adrenal glands as well. And then Tulsi is another wonderful adaptogen, and Tulsi is one that I often utilize in meditation because it really is good to connect you kind of with the next plane. And it's just beautiful also for the immune system as well. Rose is really good for coddling the heart, right? So if you have someone who is dealing with grief, someone who has been quick to tears, somebody who just needs a little, I'm getting goosebumps, somebody who just needs a little bit of that self-love, right? And then hibiscus is also beautiful for the physical heart. So hibiscus will help support lowering blood pressure, lowering cholesterol, lowering triglycerides, and it has just a beautiful tart taste and is a wonderful cardiac tonic in and of itself. You just want to watch out with too much hibiscus if somebody's already on blood pressure lowering meds, because it does work that well. So you will use 3/4 a cup of dried Tulsi or holy basil, and then you use the hibiscus calyx. Now remember, this is not the traditional hibiscus that you would find like at Home Depot or Lowe's. This is the specific Hibiscus Sabdarifa. And I have a video on my YouTube talking about Hibiscus Sabdarifa. I'll show you how to link to the YouTube later, and talking specifically about all of her beneficial properties. So this is actually a fruit calyx. If you've seen some of those hibiscus beverages, it's that beautiful red tart calyx that are in some fancy botanical beverages at restaurants. Then of course, rose petals. So when you're using rose petals, red and pink are the most medicinal, especially if they're heirloom and they have a lot of aroma and scent. So you may want to travel to the Rose Emporium in Brenham, or even the Natural Gardener here locally, who's one of our sponsors, to be able to find some beautiful roses. And then of course, ashwagandha root is what we are going to be utilizing. And so you could do chunks of the root, you could do powdered root as well. I like to do the chunks. And then a cup of local raw honey. So you could do 1/2 cup to a whole cup. The beautiful of these Oxymills, and even like when you're making fire cider, is you can make it 4 parts honey and 1 part vinegar if you wanted to. You could do 1/2 and 1/2. I usually like to do 1/5 of honey and then 4 parts vinegar. So it's really depending on your taste, and you can make it absolutely your own. So feel free to play with it. So usually I will fill the jar 1/3 to 1/2 with the herbs themselves, and then fill the remaining to the top of the lid with the apple cider vinegar and raw honey. So I always have another jar on hand in case I get a little too overzealous and I need to end up making another jar, right? Because I pour a little too much in there. And then as with alcohol and apple cider vinegar based tinctures, you're going to want to soak them for at least 6 weeks. And then you'll be able to strain. If you accidentally leave it in for like even up to a year, that's okay. It's not going to be pulling out a ton of extra crazy constituents the longer that you leave it in. It'll just be a little bit stronger. And then if you're using a mason jar with a metal lid, either try to find a plastic lid, which I know is hard to find right now, those ball plastic lids, or put some parchment paper underneath that metal lid, because the apple cider vinegar will start to eat away at that metal lid. I didn't know this at first, and it definitely happens. I've seen it happen to me a few years ago. So, but this one, when you taste it, it has the rose mixes so well with the apple cider vinegar, and it just kind of brings it out, just this beautiful undertone. And then you have a strong base with the rest, a little bit of the tartness with the hibiscus, and it's just an absolutely beautiful recipe. And so you could dose this with a spoon or 2 a day, a couple of times a day, to be able to provide all of those therapeutic supportive benefits that I had mentioned. So moving on to one of my favorite smoothies. So I love pulling fresh herbs from the garden and being able to utilize them in smoothies. It just adds this very fresh, and even in the fall, like this spring-like benefit to them, and of course flavor and medicinal as well. So I love to use lemon verbena fresh, so I'll just use a few leaves of that. I'll also use a few leaves of the Tulsi, which was the holy basil. And then often I will use frozen pineapple chunks, mango chunks. I also like to put in some plant-based milk, so some oat or some coconut's my favorite, some coconut milk, and then you can add a little bit of ice, and then any kind of powder or protein powder that you may want to add in there, because it's important to make sure that we're getting our protein and all of our amino acids. So I use just basic plain hemp protein powder that I get at HEB. And then I like to put in some coconut yogurt. You can put in some regular yogurt. I like to put in plain, so it just adds a little bit of that benefit, a little bit of protein, and a little bit of kind of those probiotics and the good bacteria. And you can do a little splash of OJ in there. I like to also put a little bit of the ashwagandha root that I had mentioned, a little bit of that powdered in there. I'll actually do ashwagandha and even burdock powder as well. And remember, ashwagandha is an adaptogen. So it's going to help you deal with stress. It's going to help with the adrenal glands, and it's going to help with sleep over time. Ashwagandha is actually a beautiful powder to be able to make a nighttime warm milk with, to be able to help with sleep as well. So this is just one of my favorite fresh ways to be able to use the harvest from the garden. And lemon verbena and Tulsi were something that I just harvested just the other day, because it's about that time of year here. And let's see. So, oh my goodness. So going into the fall. So I have this book, and it is called Color Me Vegan. And they have different recipes based on different colors of the rainbow. And so it's a whole lot of fun. So with this one, we actually have a butternut squash orange ginger soup. I mean, talk about warming and soothing, and you're going to actually blend it in the blender to get it really to that good restaurant smooth quality. So you're going to have a little bit of water for sauteing. You're going to use yellow or white onion, minced fresh ginger. You're going to use minced garlic, have some OJ on hand, a butternut squash that's kind of been peeled and cubed, some medium yellow potatoes. And I do like to use the yellow ones. I think they add a different than kind of the white potatoes, a different level within there. You're going to use vegetable stock. And again, if you wanted to use a little bit of veggie stock with some fire cider, you could, but I invite you to make it just as it is at first, because it is such a lovely, lovely way to do it. Salt and pepper, of course, and then you can have some parsley for garnish, a little zest from oranges or some scallions. I really also like to put some pumpkin seeds on top, especially this time of year, right? And pumpkin seeds are high in zinc, which is wonderful for our immune system. So this is going to make 4 to 6 servings. So often I double it because I love this stuff so much. And so really with the water in a large soup pan or a pot over medium heat. So you're going to start with sauteing onions, garlic, and ginger. Imagine the aroma within the house. You'll add the OJ and then the butternut squash, potatoes, and stock, and simmer for about 25 minutes. Really get that squash and potatoes fork tender so that they're easy to be able to blend together or puree. So you can use a regular blender, an immersion blender to be able to blend it together, and then return it to the pot and just reheat a little bit and get it ready to be able to serve. This is beautiful to have at dinner parties because it just makes a wonderful presentation. It's a pretty gentle palate, you know, for most people to be able to enjoy, and it's got so many different layers within that palette as well. So this is one of my favorites. If you guys make any of these recipes, definitely let me know. I would love to hear how they turn out. And I'm sure that in addition to providing the slides, Karen will probably ask me to put the recipes on the AHS website as well. So those will probably be on there later this month too. So garlic, rosemary, focaccia. I know we have some wonderful bread makers within the Herb Society. Over the years, I've tasted some beautiful different concoctions. So this is just really simple. And I wanted to, let's take a second to talk about the medicinal benefits of rosemary or the therapeutic support. So rosemary is exceptional for brain blood flow. So it is called the remembrance herb. So it will actually help bring good memories back to you. There's studies that show if you sniff rosemary essential oil while you study for an exam, and then if you smell it while you're taking the exam, your performance is actually enhanced. So rosemary is beautiful to enhance that brain blood flow. I know a lot of people put it in kind of their brain fog teas or tinctures and things like that as well. Rosemary tea just in and of herself is absolutely fabulous, gets you ready for Thanksgiving. And you can also take rosemary, you can use her in smudge sticks to help purify the air. You can also utilize, oh gosh, what was else? Oh, utilize rosemary in a sinus steam. Because I know a lot of people right now are having kind of the allergies and different things like that. So rosemary is drying just like sage. So even if you have rosemary and sage at home, you can put them in a pot, get it to where it's steaming, and be able to tent yourself with a towel, minding your eyes from the heat, and be able to steam and help release and dry up some of that sinus, some of the respiratory system. So in this case, we are going to be using extra virgin olive oil, garlic, rosemary, active dry yeast, sugar, water, and all-purpose flour. So a lot of things that you probably have just lying around the kitchen as it stands right now. On the next slide, we have actually the instructions. So you're going to do the olive oil, garlic, and rosemary and be able to mix them together over low heat. In a sense, you're going to be infusing the garlic and the rosemary into the olive oil. So the smaller that you chop it and the more that you open those plant cell walls, the more that you're going to be able to release. So you cook it for about 2 minutes. You don't want to get it to where the garlic turns brown, right? And then remove it and set it aside. And then in a large bowl, put the yeast and the sugar and the lukewarm water, mix those together, kind of slowly add the flour and the salt, whisking to combine, kind of scraping it, making sure that you get as much in there as possible. And when it's sticky and wet with about 75% hydration to the flour water ratio, then you can cover that bowl and let it sit for about 2 hours. It's going to rise and double in size. And then you can take the tablespoon of the rosemary garlic oil and kind of baste a baking tray, transfer the dough into there, and then be able to, and it's going to be kind of sticky, so you might want to oil your hands before dealing with the dough too. And then you can use your fingers, which can be kind of fun, to make the little dimples in the dough, add that remaining rosemary oil on top, or any kind of, and again, you could use different kinds of herbs to be able to make. You could use sage to be able to utilize as well, or even lemon balm if you wanted to be able to make different kinds of breads. So you bake it for 30 minutes at 425. And then if you have the patience, you can let it cool before slicing it. Okay. So, all right. So I have how to make some how to make general syrup in the next slide. However, I wanted to talk specifically about making a slippery elm cough syrup. So if you haven't heard of slippery elm before, and I'll give you a link of my favorite place to buy herbs online, dried herbs. So slippery elm is a bark. Well, it's a tree. So you actually utilize the inner bark of the tree, and it's very demulcent. So that means it's going to be very lubricating within the system, within the respiratory system. I also use it in tummy tea for me and for my dogs as well, because slippery elm helps soothe the digestion. It can be used with oatmeal in order to help soothe the GI as well. So slippery elm bark for its demulcent properties. Fennel is going to help with coughing. Wild cherry bark is exceptionally well to be able to suppress a cough, being antispasmodic. Valerian root is also antispasmodic as well. It's also a little sedative too, so kind of calming that constant cough and irritating cough. Licorice and cinnamon are in there a little bit for flavor, but licorice is also very supportive to the respiratory system. Cinnamon actually can help lower blood pressure. It's a stimulant, kind of moving things along throughout the body. Ginger is also very supportive for just the immune system part of it and also the respiratory system itself. And then a little bit of orange peel for flavor also. So what you're going to do is you're going to take all of these herbs and mix them with 3 cups of water and a 1.5 cups of honey. Now you could use a little bit more honey if you wanted to, the more honey that you're, up to kind of a half and half ratio. You could probably use 2 cups of honey to 3 cups of water if you wanted to. The honey is going to act as a preservative, but also the honey is going to have medicinal benefits as well. You're going to lose a little bit of those enzymes and medicinal benefits since we're heating the honey over 95 degrees, but it's still going to be very supportive. Now you could use just sugar. However, I like to use honey whenever I'm making something therapeutic, and then I'll use sugar if I'm making a syrup to put with champagne for mimosas or something like that, which can be fun as well. So all of these herbs can be sourced via Mountain Rose Herbs, and I have a link at the end of the presentation to be able to get there as well. So syrups as a recipe reference. So again, you're going to combine a couple ounces of the herbs with water and being able to simmer it down. So the whole point, and when you're simmering, you're kind of decocting the herbs. So you are really pulling out those constituents and being able to release off some of that liquid, because you want to concentrate and really make a concentrated base tea that you're going to be starting your syrup with, right? And then you will strain it out. And then, in general, for about each pint of liquid, you can add 1 to 2 cups of honey, depending on how you want to be able to do it, even up to a 1-to-1 ratio, which is a little sweet for my taste. So I usually do about a half ratio, but it used to be 1-to-1, especially before refrigeration. So warm the honey just enough for it to mix well. So I put the honey in at the very end, and many of the recipes may say to simmer it for 20-30 minutes. You can absolutely do that too. Just remember that you may kill off some of the enzymes within the raw honey. So it's kind of up to you. See which flavor profile you like, the thickness that you enjoy. And then you can also even add a little bit of brandy at the end to be able to help support it and also help with the cough a little bit too, and help with relaxation during an illness also. So the honey and the brandy will be preservatives if you wanted to be able to use the brandy, and then you can store it. Usually for me, this lasts 2 to 3 months, especially if you're not having any contamination in the bottle itself. And I do have on my website, I have a recipe download that you can get to be able to make infused syrups to do mimosas and things like that. I think I have a lavender, rose, and hibiscus recipe on there. So pumpkin spice moon milk. So I'm sure when a lot of you were younger, your parents would make some warm milk for you before bed. There's definitely something to be said with traditional cow's milk and being able to help as a sedative in the evening, but you can definitely substitute plant milks as well. So this is going to make about 16 ounces. And as you can see on the right, they have some chamomile flowers there for garnish. That may be a little bit much. So if you want to garnish it with that, you can. You definitely do not have to. So we are going to use filtered water, chamomile flowers, and 8-ounce milk of your choice. And here's where we're going to come up with some ashwagandha extract. So you can use a little bit of tincture for the ashwagandha extract, or you can use ashwagandha powder as well. And then we're going to use powder of vanilla bean, chamomile, cardamom, and pumpkin pie spice. Thought it was beautiful to share this recipe this time of year. Just a little bit of sea salt, and then we're going to have a little bit of maple syrup if you want to have a sweetener, and a little bit of the chamomile flowers for your garnish. So the next slide really has the directions. So we're really going to be making a nice milky powdery tea in this instance. So you will take the the water, kind of get it to a gentle simmer, add the chamomile flowers, let them steep for about 5 minutes. And then you, in a separate a container or a pot, you want to then heat your milk of choice. And then you can strain out the chamomile tea infusion and be able to fill each cup halfway. And then what you're going to do is you're going to make that warm moon milk. So you're going to fill the remaining half of a cup with warm milk. So in the warm milk, you can actually, as you're warming it up, you can add the ashwagandha and the powders and the sea salt as you're warming it, or you can add it after the fact and just really stir it in. And then you can add in your sweetener and garnish with chamomile. So you can put this in a blender or use a little frother like I got on Amazon to be able to make it into a latte. Definitely feel free to adjust these ratios. There's a lot of different moon milk recipes online. And I think there's even a couple of new books that have come out. There's some beautiful lavender moon milks and ashwagandha rose moon milks that you can kind of play with and just be able to help with sleeping. A straight chamomile moon milk would be beautiful for children because chamomile is safe for them and is pediatric safe and would be a beautiful thing to kind of help ease them into dreamland. Now, do remember that chamomile is a member of the ragweed family, so doing a little tea patch test on the hand is always just a good idea if somebody hasn't had chamomile before. And just really be able to enjoy it. So it's absolutely a fabulous recipe. And just a couple more recipes here as we conclude. So my favorite ginger honey, oh my gosh, I can't say enough about it, because usually when I make an infused herbal honey, it tends to crystallize and I get sad because then I can't enjoy it as much without heating up or anything. But ginger actually releases its beautiful, yummy juices. And so what y'all do is you don't have to peel it, but I personally peel the ginger and I chop it into slices like you see on the screen, just kind of really thick quarter size, right? I place the ginger in a clean, dry mason jar, and then I fill the rest with local raw honey. And even later that day or the next day, you're going to notice the ginger's already releasing its beautiful juices. So you'll actually see kind of a layer of liquid on top. So I start to really invert it, mix it, and infuse it. And even every time before I use it, I kind of infuse it, shake it back up together. And it's not spicy, right? So like if you take one of those gingers out and you eat on it, which I tend to do throughout the year because I don't strain this, I leave the ginger in all year. It will be very, very spicy still, right? But the ginger honey is not spicy. It's very, at least to me, it's very mild and just beautiful to be able to put on biscuits or waffles or in tea as well, and just adds that extra medicinal benefit. You could make the ginger honey and add it to an Oxymil that we had talked about earlier as well. So, and with all herbs, you kind of wait until you find the taste that you like and you can strain it out. But like I say, I leave mine in and I actually make a new batch of ginger honey every year or so. And so I'll just kind of eat some of the honey, put some new honey in there, let it infuse together and just leave that ginger in there and eat a few throughout the year, especially if I start to feel like I have a little cold or a little bit of something coming on, right? So we have a couple more slides as we're closing here. So where to source your herbs. So I have a link here to Mountain Rose Herbs and again, you can find the slides. I'll put them on my website. And I'll give you that website in just a second. So you can absolutely be able to go there and find almost any herbs that you want to, organic as well as non-organic. And you can buy them by the 4 ounce to a pound. And they're a really good, I really like them as my #1 primary source outside of Austin. So in Austin, there's the Herb Bar. In Dripping Springs, there's Sacred Moon that you can also get herbs from as well. So then I have on the next slide via my website, you can get to my YouTube. I just wanted to highlight it, that I have a lot of different videos talking about making tinctures, making infused oils, making different teas, and even being able to utilize the herb, talking about individual herbs and their supportive benefits. So there's probably about 50 or 60 videos on there. And then finally, as we close, I wanted to be able to invite you to visit my website at autumnsharvest.tv. It is .tv because I have so many videos on there. And at the top, you can see I have this little pink box where you can get that free fire cider recipe and video if you wanted to be able to get that. I also have a small online apothecary shop. We'll be doing, for my email list, we'll be doing a 25% off during November. And then I have a couple of courses as well, because I love to really be able to share the information. So I have, there's a wait list for my Sage Advice Herbal Apothecary membership where I teach each week for an hour. But right now I have a couple of recorded courses that if you are interested in learning more about herbs and being able to make different tinctures, the Empowered Herbalist is a great one. It's a 6-module course where we go through making teas and tinctures and oils and salves and different herbal powders and honeys and syrups. And then I have a couple of mini courses. One of them I think is perfect for this time of the year for being able to do beginner herbal gifts. It's an hour-long course for $20, and it really shows you how to make some different recipes and things that you can then share for the holiday season. So that's really what I have for you today. So just remember autumnsharvest.tv, and I would love to open to questions.
Thank you so much, Autumn. I have the questions in chat as soon as I can search for them again. Here we go. The first question we have is from Diane Salazar. She's asking about the paper lid on the poached pear recipe, if that is a paper plate or does it matter?
Yes, I've pulled up the chat here. So it can definitely be a paper plate. Absolutely. That's probably going to be the easiest paper lid that we have laying around, right? So that can absolutely be utilized. Good question. And then I see here, Janet, you had a question, can we freeze lemon balm? So you could definitely freeze it in a couple of different ways. You could cut and chop and just be able to freeze it in general like you would other herbs. Drying herbs is the way that I choose to preserve it. However, you could also make lemon balm ice, really concentrated lemon balm ice cubes to be able to utilize in recipes. You could also put it inside some olive oil in ice cube trays and be able to make something that then you could begin to saute with or be able to utilize that way as well. So a couple of different ways that you could freeze it for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then it looks like, I think it cuts off the name, but I think Chelsea had a question. So you didn't hear quite clearly where it is recommended to find the culinary rose or flowers locally. So there is a spot, it's on Mary Street in Austin. Oh, there's my timer. So I did well. Okay, so it's on Mary Street in Austin, and it's called the Herb Bar. And and then also there is Sacred Moon in Dripping Springs. So if I go into either one of those places, I'm in there usually for like half an hour, like really shopping around because they have a lot of herbs that you can purchase. They also have a lot of different tinctures and teas and things like that. And then they have, stones and cards and books and a lot of different lovely, as I would call like woo-woo wonderful things for you to be able to experience. So that would be, and that would be dried herbs, right? So that's going to be the Herb Bar or Sacred Moon. Now, locally, if you wanted to get a plant, I go to the Natural Gardener, which is one of our AHS sponsors. And even if you have, they're really great at answering even general questions at the Natural Gardener. So if you have a diseased plant, you can take some of those leaves in and show them, and they'll be able to tell you how to treat it, what it's missing, all that kind of stuff. They're really, really helpful in that way. You could also go to Brenham to the Antique Rose Emporium, I believe is what it's called, which is, Judith had put it in here, which is supposed to be a lovely field trip in and of itself. And you can find the beautiful pink and red heirloom medicinal roses. And then let's see. So it looks like the Rose Emporium, we're going to have a presentation this coming spring from them. That sounds awesome. And let's see, also there was a comment, some other sweet squashes should also be delicious. Yes, and even sweet potatoes in the soup as well would be fantastic. So a 1/4 teaspoon of sugar in the rosemary bread. So sugar and salt, sometimes they do a great way of balancing themselves in recipes. So you could definitely leave it out and see how it would work for you. But it's just kind of being able to have kind of them amalgam together and be able to provide that kind of step up a notch in using the sugar within the recipe. And yeah, the sugar can feed the yeast too. Absolutely. And then Sylvia questions, so what exactly is the difference between raw honey and any other kind of honey? So raw honey is not going to be pasteurized. It's not going to be heated or treated in any kind of way. So there are just kind of like milk, right? So you can get the raw unpasteurized, or you can get treated pasteurized milk. So it's similar with the honey itself. And there's definitely a lot of local honey sources, and there's even some meaderies around here that make honey wine with their homemade honey, or their company made honey as well. So a lot of great resources that we have. And so Judith, great question with the fire cider. So is that meant to be a quart or a 1/2 gallon jar? So really, I make mine in 32-ounce jars. And you could absolutely do it in a 1/2 gallon jar as well. You just want to kind of make sure that if you're using a larger jar, you increase the ratio of the herbs themselves. Like I say, I usually fill it about 1/2 to 3/4 with the herbs for fire cider to make sure that it's really pungent, right? But you could definitely use any kind of size jar that you would want to. And then we had a question actually before the presentation started about using lemon balm and how you can use that, because a lot of people have prolific, being a mint, lemon balm. And so there is absolutely a number of ways that you could use it. Of course, fresh, you could make tinctures, you could make teas. You could also dry it, and there's so many ways dried that you could be able to utilize it. So you could definitely make teas with dried herb. You could infuse it in oil, and you could use that as a culinary oil or as a topical oil, because lemon balm is antiviral. So if anybody had a kind of a virus sore or anything like that, you could use that topically. You could also be able to, I put lemon balm in smudge sticks. I like to use culinary sage and rosemary and lavender and lemon balm and lemon verbena from the garden to be able to make smudge sticks. And let's see, you could absolutely turn it into a salve. You could powder it. So that's what I was going to show you guys. So I have a little coffee grinder here, right? And so what I do when I powder herbs, I'll take the dry and cut, herbal leaves or flowers, and you put it in here, and you want to be able to, as opposed to when you make coffee, I won't turn it on because it's like loud as heck, but when you make coffee, you just push it down, you grind, right? But when you're making herbal powders, you're going to do it for a few seconds, maybe 5 seconds, let off for about 5 seconds. Grind it for 5 seconds, let off for 5 seconds, because you don't want it to get too hot and denature the herbs. And you kind of, whenever I'm grinding it, I go, and I kind of shake it around so that the herbs are moving around and getting the new stuff kind of down below. And then make sure before you open it, you kind of tap it and wait a second before you open it up, because you're going to have an herbal powder poof that kind of comes out, right? So I'll sometimes make herbal powders outside. And this is, for example, an herbal powder right here that I've made with chamomile, lemon balm, and passion flower. And then you can take this herbal powder, you can put it into the moon milk, you can put it in a smoothie, or you can mix it with honey and make little herbal pill balls, and they'll last about a week in the fridge so that you can dose with some, these are all nervine herbs to calm the nervous system. Right. And then, for example, I even have a canker sore powder that you can make with herbs with echinacea, comfrey, chaparral, and licorice. So just a lot of different ways that you can also utilize herbal powders. So with dried herbs, you can do almost anything with them, really. You could reconstitute it with some water and make a poultice or a compress if you needed to, little gift bags. And I love bath tea. So if I have an abundance, like the nervine herbs, like lemon balm, it's going to absorb through your skin. And I make a big jar of bath tea, and I'll just strain that and pour it straight into the bath. And that nervine will come and go into one of your largest organs, your skin. It will help calm and soothe the nervous system, because lemon balm is called the gladdening herb. A couple of more questions. So any downsides to using the unpasteurized honey? Not really. Just keep in mind that children under a year of age, you don't want to give them honey at all because of the botulism possibility. But I use raw honey all the time. And it actually provides some really good enzymes and benefits to allergies, especially if it's local, as well as to your GI tract as well. And then one last question, get in your questions if you want to. So what about using a mortar and pestle instead of a spice grinder? If you have the elbow grease, you could absolutely use a mortar and pestle to be able to grind it down. Yeah, absolutely. I'm usually a little bit of a, I don't know, I have like pretty mortar and pestles inside of my apothecary, but I'm a little bit of a lazy bum when it comes to it. So I have a dedicated herb grinders, right? I have one that's labeled for internal and one that's labeled for external as well. Cause I don't, cause for Cayenne, I don't want to accidentally mix that up and have that in the internal, right? So very wonderful questions today. It was just a blessing.
Can I ask, for
here.
some reason, I cannot get my chat to go through. I don't know why, but I mean, I can't figure it out. But anyway, I was wondering, what does ashwagandha or whatever you call it, what's that taste like?
Ashwagandha. So she is in a tincture. She can be a little bit, with any of the roots, they're going to be full bodied. They're going to be robust. I find that when I put it into a smoothie or into a moon milk, it very much mellows out and I can't even taste it within there because I usually just kind of add a spoonful. She's one of the definitely softer to me in a powder form kind of herbs. But she can, being a root, it does have a little bit of pungency. So that's where I often mix ashwagandha with rose. And whenever I make an ashwagandha, I like to make an ashwagandha rose tincture that I use brandy as the base to be just a little bit more sweet. And then I also will put some honey in there and make it into an elixir. So there's definitely some ways to, because I always talk about with herbs, compliance is everything, right? And so being able to make it yummy enough for you to have on an ongoing basis. So ashwagandha to me, she's still very, compared to like yellow dock or, she's still very imbibable, but she is deep and robust. And sometimes you want a little bit of another flavor profile to mix with her it's
in a lot of Indian food. And also I see it now occasionally in soups or what have you. But I just didn't have any idea if it was going to be like, I just can't imagine what the taste would be like, what it would add. And I want to add it, but I'm afraid to.
Yeah, I would just start with a teaspoon, into a soup stock and then see how you enjoy that. And then you can kind of kick it up a notch until you get to, a flavor profile that, until you find, oh, that's a little too much, now we need to kind of.
So it's kind of on the hot, spicy side, would you say?
At least
it's on the dirt side.
Oh.
Yeah, a little bit more like kind of grassy, kind of earthy, right? It's definitely not like ginger.
Like a mushroom? Is it like kind of a mushroom?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as umami, but yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, because I've been curious about that for a while. I keep forgetting to ask my Indian friend what it tastes like. And I don't know, this might be a competitor of yours and I don't want to take your business away, but there's a new place in Buda on Main Street that sells tinctures. They're getting real chic down there, I guess, because this one, I haven't been there. I keep trying to get there, but they've taken that section on Buda, and they also serve different kinds of drinks in a bar, a juice bar kind of thing. I don't know, but I've got to get down there, but I just thought I'd mention it because it might be if I go and see, it might be a good place to go for a tour or something. But
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know what they call it. But anyway, I just thought I don't want it to take your business.
Oh, no. I love, sharing the knowledge and, about where we have good places, especially nearby. I hadn't heard of the Buda one. There's also a place in San Marcos that one of my herbal classmates has opened, and it's called Herbs and Oddities. And they have a lot of different tinctures and teas, and they also have a stone store, like a rock store right next to them, where they sell a lot of the amethyst and the citrine and the rose quartz and things like that. And they source them all at the large shows across the US. So there's definitely a lot of magical places nearby.
Excuse me, Autumn, and who was it? Was it Betty who was asking these questions? I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I can't get. How do you get? Type in my chat, but how do I get it?
It's not a problem right now, Betty. What we're going to do is wrap this up because we've got some other business to attend to. But people are welcome to stay and visit with Autumn if you have other questions or just anything you wanted to ask after we officially close down the meeting. We can still
Okay.
have conversation, okay?
Well, I need to learn to use this chat because I can't do it.
Well, I'm sure we have some people who can help you with that. So, all right. Well, Autumn, thank you again. Thank everybody for your wonderful questions. And Autumn, thank you for taking over, being proactive and taking over the questioning phase, the Q&A thing. So we appreciate a true professional.